Welcome to Momentum, a podcast breaking down the issues facing women's sports brought to you by Mecca Empower. I'm Kat Sasso, and each week I will be joined by experts and athletes as we dive deep into the world of women's sports and all the trials and triumphs that exist within them. This week, I'll be joined by Adelaide Thunderbird Tayla Williams as we dive deep into an issue that affects not only women around the world but athletes as well, endometriosis. But before we jump into Taylor's story, I'd better go get ready. Endometriosis is a chronic condition that affects 1 in 10 women worldwide, yet for many it's still shrouded in silence. For athletes, the physical and emotional toll can be particularly challenging, as symptoms often overlap with the demands of high-performance training. From debilitating pain to the struggles of seeking a diagnosis, endometriosis remains a barrier not just to daily life, but to many women's careers in sports. Today, we're going to hear from someone who knows this all too well. Our guest has been navigating the complexities of endometriosis while pursuing her dreams in professional netball. She's dealt with long waits for a diagnosis, multiple surgeries, and the impact of living with a condition that's often misunderstood, even by the people closest to her. But it's also through her experience that we begin to see the power of sports in raising awareness and creating space for conversations around women's health. We'll talk about her journey, how she first realised something was wrong, and how netball became a source of support, and the challenges she faced when her diagnosis finally came. She'll also share her thoughts on how endometriosis affects athletes' careers and what changes are needed to make diagnosis and treatment more accessible. This conversation is not just about sports, it's about the real-life experiences that shape us, the strength required to face chronic illness, and the importance of speaking up so that no woman has to suffer in silence. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to touch first on your career in netball. Can you tell me a little bit where that started?
Yeah, so I started, I guess, playing netball because my mum and sister and aunties and everyone started playing. Didn't necessarily want to play when I first started, but around the age of 9, started playing. Grew up in the country, so very sport kind of focused community, and started my career with Hummocks Netball Club and kind of moved through the ranks, and now here we are with the Adelaide Thunderbirds.
And you've been a really big advocate in the way of endometriosis. When was it then that you first realized that something was wrong?
I think the first time that I had a bit of a suspicion, still probably didn't know that anything was wrong at that stage, when I was just being selected for my first state team. So it was under 15s, and we were training quite a lot, and we were due to go away for our first nationals away trip. And I just remember having my period, and I guess all the kind of symptoms that I was experiencing when I was having that, all I could think about was how that there was no way that I could perform when was away if I was due to have my period at that stage. So I guess with the lead up to that and the impact that it was having on my fatigue and sleep and ability to train is probably the first kind of warning sign that I sought help for.
And can you walk me through what the process was like to getting a diagnosis?
Yeah, so I probably when I first realized I was, like I said, under 15s state, so 14, kind of 15-year-old, and officially then got my diagnosis when I was 22. So I guess 7 years for me, which is what they say is the average time to receive a diagnosis. I kind of first, growing up in the country, you have your kind of local GP that I first went to, and looking back on it now, it definitely wasn't the right thing, and I don't want to encourage it, but went straight on the pill just to manage kind of the symptoms. And that was really all I had for the first probably 4 or 5 years, was just trialing different pills, having that to mask all the symptoms, I guess. And I probably didn't necessarily then push or do much more about it until I then eventually moved to Adelaide once I finished school. And then I guess being in a bigger city, you have a bit more access to different GPs and gynecologists and specialists and stuff. So it was then probably after about a year of living in Adelaide that I decided to go to a female GP, and who knew a little bit more about the women's health space. And then I guess was probably one of the lucky ones that went to a really great female GP to start with, who referred me straight to a gynecologist. I know that's really hard and doesn't often happen for a lot of people, so I was pretty lucky with that. And then kind of went and saw a gynecologist and worked with her for probably about 3 years then before I officially had my surgery. I think from the moment I saw that female health GP, she probably suspected that it was endo that I did have, but with my gynecologist and with training and kind of netball commitments, we worked with a lot of different other methods of managing symptoms before I eventually had my surgery to obtain my diagnosis.
And you've had 2 surgeries up until now, but how has that affected you? How has that affected your career in netball?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me, like I probably saw that female health GP in 2018 when I was 18, and then didn't then have my laparoscopy until 2022 when I was 22. So I then kind of waited out those 4 years working with a female health GP and my gynecologist with managing symptoms, but it wasn't necessarily ever a good time with netball or with training commitments or with competitions to have that time off for the surgeries. And those surgeries, they do say, are more minimally invasive than some other surgeries, but there's still a pretty big recovery time. And giving your body the time to recover and rest and heal from those surgeries is something that I probably didn't have with my training schedule when I needed it to. So even just finding a good time to do it with netball was probably a pretty big thing that meant I then didn't necessarily have a surgery as early as I could to obtain my official diagnosis.
Yeah, because they say it's, a lot of the time 6 to 8 weeks recovery. You don't really have the luxury of having 6 to 8 weeks to take off from sport, do you?
No, definitely not. And I think coming through the, I guess, netball pathway, all elite sport is, but it's so cutthroat. And for me, I didn't want to give anyone else an opportunity to think that I wasn't able to perform or play. And so I never wanted to ask for 6 to 8 weeks. And you never know what they were going to find or how the surgery was going to go with, if it was going to be 6 weeks and you'd be back and you'd be all good, or if it was going to be 8 weeks or longer. Like, that surgery is such a massive unknown. And a lot of people do struggle for longer than 8 weeks after their surgery, just with that recovery time. So where I was in my netball career, still fighting for a spot in the Thunderbirds, still in the underage pathway. I was in the under 21s World Youth Cup squad. So we had training camps in the off season from our kind of T-bird season. And so there wasn't ever a break in our schedule to allow for that downtime. And so it wasn't until I was older than 21 and just had T-birds to concentrate on that I then had a little bit more time in the off season to allow for that recovery of whatever that would look like. So it was probably, I did put it off for a long time based on my netball commitments and not wanting to, I guess, come across as weak or incapable because I needed to have time off for a surgery.
And how can you say that netball has sort of supported your illness and supported your recovery and, dealing with this? How has netball come through and supported you in that?
Yeah, I think obviously the big thing with endo is everyone's experiences are so different. Like, no one's going to have the same symptoms or the same experience with what they're going through. And so I guess for me, it's something that I still struggle with, is speaking up and asking for help when I need it. I think we don't have enough research or understanding of the ways that endo does impact a female athlete in general. So for me, I'm still learning to ask for help, to modify things when I need to. I'm really lucky at the T-Birds at the moment that we have a really great strength and conditioning coach and physio that I do spend most of my time with, that then can modify things if and when I need to. But it is still really tough to ask for that help when I guess your mindset is always you want to push on, which is not necessarily what's the best thing for you at the time. Um, but yeah, definitely speaking and asking for help and just letting them know how you're feeling, because every day is a different day and you face different challenges with that. So yeah, speaking up and asking for help is something that I'm still getting better at, but I am a lot better than I used to be.
And do you think that netball can be a good vessel to start these conversations and start conversations surrounding gynecological disorders like endometriosis and PCOS and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. Like netball is the number one female participated sport in Australia, and there's so many women and girls that play it. And I think the best thing that I've found so far is when I did have that surgery and kind of got my official diagnosis. I posted on Instagram, which up until that point, I'd never spoken to anyone about any of kind of the things that I was going through, and not even my family. And posting that post on Instagram was scary, but also a way that it was easier to share it than having those conversations. And it's definitely not the right way to go about it, or what I would encourage anyone to do. But that kind of opened up a platform where I had so many people reply and comment and send me private messages saying they were going through the same thing, or they weren't sure what was normal, or if they had the same thing too. And that was kind of the first time that I realized how much of an impact you can kind of have, and not only on my immediate friends and family, but a bigger kind of broader picture. And the best thing about netball and female sports is we have such a big reach because so many people do play it. And I think there's no better platform to start those conversations and I guess share what is normal and what's normal, and just educate young women and girls about their bodies and what happens to our bodies. Like for me, never got any education or understanding about my period and what was, I guess, right or wrong, or what to experience, and what that would look like. So I was kind of learning on the fly, doing my own research, understanding that. Whereas I think if we can share that more openly and have those conversations, we get that education out a lot younger, and we are getting better with adding it into our kind of schooling and sporting clubs and stuff. But I definitely think netball and sport in general was a really great way to have that community focus and share those stories.
And you just spoke about, social media. We've seen a big rise in women who speak out about endometriosis and their diagnosis and their process through that on socials now. You've got people who have got their whole story on social about things that work for them, things that don't work for them, and kind of putting tips out there. Do you think that these kind of things help? Do you think that by putting that out there and, creating a conversation, do you feel like for you it kind of makes it more comfortable for you to then go and speak to other people about it, or kind of leave the door open for people to come and talk to you about it?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I first started that post on social media, was the easiest way for me to kind of talk about it without having to talk about it in a way. And I think back then I probably wouldn't have had a conversation with someone in person about it, or spoken about it, I guess, freely in a general conversation sense. I feel like that was a little while ago now, and I'm more than happy to speak to anyone and everyone that wants to speak about it, because I see how much of an impact it can have. And I think those things, and sharing information and tips and tricks and stuff on social media, is a great way for people to pick up different things that work for them, or don't necessarily work for them. I think the other thing we have to remember is everyone has different symptoms, everyone has different experiences, and the same thing that works for me isn't going to work for you. And so we do have to be careful that what we're sharing is, I guess, right in a way that people aren't taking as gospel, and that is kind of the only way. There's a massive holistic approach needed to manage endo and to deal with the symptoms, and we know there's not a cure for it. So it'll is about symptom management and using, I guess, a holistic approach of what we can do to manage it. So I feel like social media is a great way to share different things and for people to share what is or isn't working for them, but making sure that the people on the receiving end are doing what works best for them and not because what they've seen on socials, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And heading back to your career, your professional career, you made your pro netball debut during COVID. But what was it like to debut in a COVID bubble in Queensland without your friends and family?
Yeah, it was a pretty surreal experience. I think looking back at that time, for me living in Adelaide, we were very, very lucky with COVID, and not necessarily having a big lockdown. We didn't have it like the other states had it. So from being in Adelaide, it was probably a pretty good experience, but also as bad as it sounds, COVID was probably the reason why I'm here, playing for the T-Birds in a sense. Like, I got that opportunity to play, and debut for the T-Birds because of the hub and having the restrictions on the border. I wasn't in the team at the time. I was a training partner, and was one of the 2 lucky enough to then be taken into that hub, which then meant they had 12 on the bench instead of the normal 10, and I got the opportunity kind of that way. So I am quite grateful to COVID that I did have that opportunity, when the world wasn't in a great place and a lot of people had it really, really tough. So um, that was kind of a silver lining for me that I got that opportunity. But I think with where we were then, it was taking my opportunity. It was obviously disappointing not to have friends and family and being away from home and not getting to experience that with everyone else. But um, I get to do that on a weekly basis now with them, which is really special. And I am grateful that I got the opportunity to, yeah, start my career then. And well, I guess start my Thunderbirds career then anyway. And so, yeah, it was pretty tough, but it was a memory that I'm very grateful for.
And, you know, I'm sure that there are probably so many athletes, female athletes, who deal with an endo diagnosis, but not many speak out about it. So, how do you manage day by day with your career and with living with a chronic illness?
Yeah, it's obviously something that I'm very, very passionate about speaking about. And I think before I had my diagnosis and speaking out, I didn't know any elite athlete that did have it. And obviously, we've had a bit more of a movement where it is becoming more of a normalized topic to speak about. And I know we've still got a really long way to go until it becomes easy for people to speak about it and have the open and honest conversations. But yeah, and then I think no 2 days are ever the same. I think it is something really important to remember is although I have to front up to train, I have to front up to play, that is my job. And I love it. And I'm very, very grateful that I get to do it. It doesn't mean that it's not hard. And I think we can see people fronting up or playing sport, and you only see a very, very tiny snippet of their lives, and you don't necessarily know what someone's managing or dealing with behind the scenes. And I think the best way that I like to manage it and deal with it is when I rock up to training, I'm there to train, I'm there to do a job. I'm there to be Taylor, the netball player. And I do try and separate Taylor living with a chronic illness and Taylor, the netball player, because I like to have a bit of an escape from it more than anything. Like, chronic illnesses are so all consuming. They take up every aspect of your life. They affect absolutely everything. And although it's not always easy to say or speak about or share, it doesn't mean that someone's not dealing with that or managing that. And so it is really, really hard at times, and I do struggle and I'm still not great at it, but I'd like to, yeah, separate it where I can and, um, manage it as best I can with a lot of different strategies. And what I use one day would vary to the next day to manage what I'm going through or how I'm feeling at that time. But um, I try my best, but I'm still learning.
And, like you said, no two women are the same, no two endometriosis cases are the same. But how do you think that living with gynecological issues and endo affects athletes in their life, in their day to day and in their career as well?
Oh, I think just for a normal person living with endo, it affects everything in your life, let alone putting your body through so much physical stress, training wise on a day to day. I think the some things, well, the biggest things for me that I experience are the fatigue. I get really, really fatigued. And obviously, for a normal person, that's really hard. But then when you're trying to front up and put your body through high intensity training sessions when you're already feeling fatigue can be really hard. And that's probably the biggest thing that I struggle with. And I'm still learning how to manage. But um, and then I think it affects everything from like nutrition, the bloating, the types of foods that you need to eat. Obviously, the kind of better foods to have, but then while you're trying to manage getting enough food in for your training kind of demands and eating the right things at the right time that are going to fuel your body for sport, but also fuel your body from the I guess gynecological aspect as well. And then the pain, the cramping, the nerve pain, the back pain, just the general um, I guess, symptoms that someone with any of those kind of conditions would experience, I feel like are sometimes a lot more heightened when you're putting your body through that much more stress in your training and competition environments.
And you mentioned earlier that the average time for someone to get diagnosed is around 7 years. What do you think needs to change in order to make diagnosis and treatment more accessible?
I think the number one thing is education. I think we don't understand enough about periods and a cycle in general to then understand when things aren't normal or things that we could ask more questions about occur. I think we don't, um, I think knowledge is power, and I don't think we have enough knowledge from the young age to then help women identify what is or isn't something that they should be putting up with. I also think we have this stigma around periods and talking about them in general, but also that there's this idea associated that we should just put up with it, get on with it kind of idea. And I don't think that's right at all. But I think it's something that's more so been ingrained in us that it is what it is and you have to just deal with it. And it's not right and you shouldn't just have to deal with it. So I think the education, understanding, and stigma around periods in general and female health needs to move a long way so that we can have these open and honest conversations. But then also having, I guess, more specialists, female health GPs in that space so that when someone doesn't know what's right or wrong or needs to ask more questions or needs support or wants help, they have places to go that they're going to be seen and heard. I think you hear so many stories about how people just get chucked on the pill and then that's the management strategy and see you later. And that's not how we should be looking at any gynecological condition. And when you do at a young age go to a doctor, have that experience, get put on the pill and walk out, it makes it really hard to then go back and advocate for yourself. And as hard as it is, one of the reasons why I then ended up with my diagnosis because you had to advocate for yourself. And I want it to get to the point that you don't have to push so hard to get information, to get understanding of what's happening to you or get a diagnosis, whatever that looks like. And just to have that better support network and understanding of where to go and what to do. I think will go a long way in helping people get a diagnosis sooner.
Absolutely. And have you got any advice for people listening to this who might also be suffering from endo?
I think something that I always come back to is you know your body better than anyone else. And I think within yourself, you have a gut instinct if something's right or wrong. And I think we need to trust that a little bit more. I think if you're not comfortable with an answer that you got, or going to a doctor and not getting the education or the understanding or the response that you wanted, advocate for yourself and push back, go see someone different. Like, if you're not comfortable and if you're not getting the answers or the help that you need, push more and I guess seek that out a little bit more. I think, yeah, like I said, you know your body better than anyone else. And if you think something's not right, fight until you get an answer that you need.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where, we all hope, and as someone who this has affected my life personally, we all want there to be so much more research done, so much more money invested, and there's such a long way to go, but it's come so far up until this point. So hopefully we can see a lot more research, a lot more money, and so much more being put into endo research. But thank you so much for joining me today. And before I let you go, I like to give my guests a chance to highlight a woman in sport that they think is doing amazing things. So is there anyone who's inspired you lately?
I think I love following the Female Athlete Project. I think what they advocate for and the information they share on female athletes in general is really inspiring, and cool to see the different female athletes doing really special things. And so I think, yeah, highlighting that work and having, yeah, a broad range of female athletes having a platform that they deserve to have. I think female athletes don't necessarily have a platform that they should have or deserve to spread information and awareness about really special things. And so, yeah, I really like what the Female Athlete Project are doing.
I love that answer. Well, thank you, Taylor, so much for joining me today. And to everyone watching at home, thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure that you leave a review and let us know who you want to see next time on Momentum.